Kinashama viyachate Shayate tadashat spritam Manashava yaga hataha Yaha Udyatam, an offering, Anadiritam, rejecting, Kinasham, from a miser, Abhiyachate, begs, Kshiyate, is lost, Tat, is, Yasha, reputation, Spitam, widespread, Manaha, honor, Cha, and, Anagyaya, by negligent behavior, by neglectful behavior, Hataha, destroyed. Translation by Srila Prabhupada: one who rejects an offering that comes of its own accord, but later begs a boon from a miser, thus loses his widespread reputation, and his pride is humbled by the neglectful behavior of others. Responsively, one who rejects an offering that comes of its own accord, but later begs a boon from a miser, thus loses his widespread reputation, and his pride is humbled by the neglectful behavior of others. Purport. The general procedure of Vedic marriage is that a father offers his daughter to a suitable boy. That is a very respectable marriage. A boy should not go to the girl's father and ask for the hand of his daughter in marriage. That is considered to be humbling one's respectable position. Swayambhuva Manu wanted to convince Kardama Muni, since he knew that the sage wanted to marry a suitable girl, open quote, I am offering just such a suitable wife. Do not reject the offer, or else, because you are in need of a wife, you will have to ask for such a wife from someone else, who may not behave with you so well. In that case, your position will be humbled. Close quote. Another feature of this incident is that Swayambhuva Manu was the emperor, but he went to offer his qualified daughter to a poor brahmana. Kardama Muni had no worldly possessions. He was a hermit living in the forest, but he was advanced in culture. Therefore, in offering one's daughter to a person, the culture and quality are counted as prominent, not wealth or any other material consideration. Verse again. One who rejects an offering that comes of its own accord, but later begs a boon from a miser, thus loses his widespread reputation, and his pride is humbled by the neglectful behavior of others. In the purport, Prabhupada is talking about an arranged marriage. The general procedure, he says, of Vedic marriage is that a father offers his daughter to a suitable boy. Unfortunately, a lot of so-called arranged marriages are unsuccessful, especially these days. There are people who profess to match their daughter with a suitable boy who may or not be a suitable boy. Of course, nowadays there's a lot of so-called astrological calculation about compatibility. And if the charlatan astrologers say that they are 80% compatible, then that they feel that they should go ahead with the marriage. The problem is that many of the today's astrologers or stargazers or astrophysicists are charlatans. and these supposed matches do not really work. That is the problem. In certain parts of the world, it is very common for arranged marriages to exist and astrological compatibility to be calculated. But often it is inaccurate. Astrology or astrophysics, in a way, is kind of a science. Not kind of, it is a science, or a mathematical science, in that if you know when you were born, down to the hour or the minute or the second, and you know the coordinates of the place which you were born in, then a bona fide astrologer or astrophysicist can calculate the future. That's the science. But nowadays, very few people know when their moment of birth occurred. They don't know they may know the hour, but they don't know the minutes, and definitely don't know the seconds or fractions of a second. And therefore, their astrophysical calculations tend to be kind of like speculative and not really very scientific or mathematical. But a good astrologer, if he has those details, he can not only predict what the future is going to be, but he or she can predict what one's past life was. But that kind of astrology is very, very rare, or that kind of knowledge is very rare. Even on my own birth certificate, it says the hour of birth, but not the minutes and not the seconds, and it has the name of the hospital, but not the geographical coordinates, which a good astrologer has to have, all those details, and then he can be reasonably accurate. So this idea of ruining one's reputation by begging for a wife or a husband is a commonplace thing, and reputation in days of yore was considered, if people were honest and reliable and trustworthy and did things according to Vedic knowledge, they were considered to be reasonably good people. But nowadays, those kinds of people are very rare. And this kind of migrates onto the concept of karma. To accept what is given, naturally, to accept it, and to say what is taken away or what is not given to me is fate or destiny. Karma is not a law. So very often we hear about the so-called law of karma, but it's not a law. It's like destiny or fate or a phenomenon or just a thing. In some English grammar dictionaries, they distinguish between what they call mass nouns and count nouns. I don't know if where I learned English, these dictionaries didn't have such things, but in British English, which is probably taught all over the world, there are such things as count nouns, like fidelity is a mass noun, and cat is a count noun. You can have cats, but you can't have fidelities. So the difference is that a count noun can be made plural by adding an S to it, and a mass noun cannot be made plural. It's just a phenomenon that exists. So people have a very convoluted or incorrect idea about what karma is, and some karma people think that it's just a duty or something else, but it really has more to do with fate and destiny, and accepting what is there already, and accepting good and bad situations as they occur. Or we devotees call it Krishna's arrangement. So what is karma? Karma is kind of Krishna's arrangement, and no one knows what karma actually is, except, of course, Krishna knows. He knows everything. But we don't really know what karma is. And when I was younger, I grappled with this concept a lot. What is karma? I mean, before I was a devotee. And one of the questions that comes up a lot is, why do good things happen to bad people, and why do bad things happen to good people? it's very hard to understand. I think Prabhupada once told us that when a plane crash occurs, 300 people or something like that, the people who fill up a 747, are destined to die at that particular moment. It's a very strange thing that 300 people, they may not even know each other, they may not be related to one another, they may be of different ages, they may be of different genders, but somehow they're all destined, or according to karma, to die at that particular moment. And it's a very strange thing. And the same thing exists in warfare. A lot of people are died or killed, and it's a very difficult thing to understand. What is karma? So karma is kind of like it's a mass noun. You can't have karmas. You can have karma, but it depends on what you were in your past life, or what you're going towards in your present life. That's karma. It's not an easy thing to understand what it is, but it does help. It helps us to understand why sometimes bad things happen to good people and good things happen to bad people. Sometimes we're very very mystified by people who are very evil, or they've killed a lot of people, and they're very wealthy. They're very beautiful. They have a very beautiful husband or wife or child. At the same time, they're very evil, but many good things are given to them or happen to them. And at the same time, many people who are good have all their good things taken away from them. They're deprived of their automobile, their house. And I think there was a fire in the Los Angeles area in Pacific Palisades where a lot of houses burned down. And these were very well-to-do, wealthy, and fortunate people who lost their homes, and they couldn't even go and search through the rubble to find their jewelry. It was that bad of a case. I was in one of those houses, so I know. I mean, they're almost. I know what they're like. They're almost like palaces. They all burnt down to the ground just in a few seconds, and. I'm pretty good friends with the president of the Los Angeles Temple, so I contacted him, and I said, well, are you all right? What's going on? And he said that the fires actually were quite far away from the Los Angeles Temple. This place is north, and it's right on the coast, so somehow or other it was a very tragic thing. But in another way, it was a result of karma, that all these people, they lost their wealth, they lost their houses, they lost their jewelry, they lost all their photo albums, things that they treasured, and some of their most sacred possessions were lost forever. So sometimes bad things happen to good people. And it does happen. I don't know how they all burnt down. Some of them were probably made out of porcelain or brick, but somehow they burnt down, even though there's a lot of wood in there. I think when there was a big bombing during World War II of Japan, there were big fires, and almost the entire city burnt down because all the houses were made out of wood. And in San Francisco, around about 1906, there was a big fire. Most of the houses burnt there because they were made of wood. And a lot of good people lost everything. They lost their houses, they lost their cars, they lost their everything. So that's fate. That's karma. It's a difficult thing to process. What is karma? What is? It's not a law. It's just a phenomenon. It's a strange. Unknown thing that Krishna knows, but we don't know what it is exactly. So in a sense, one who is spiritually advanced is not one who, as we have read, is one who doesn't lament or hanker. He doesn't lament for what he or she loses, and doesn't hanker for what he or she wants to have. I want to have a new car, I want to have a bigger house, I want to have a beautiful husband or wife. But if I don't get them, I cry. I feel very depressed. But that's fate. That's karma. I had it. In a way, it's very cruel to think that wars and plane crashes, which are very tragic things, and fires in which a lot of houses are burnt down. It's a very tragic thing. But in another sense, it's due to karma. It's due to past actions. It's due to past behavior. And so nothing, in a sense, nothing happens by accident. It appears to be a terrible accident, that there was a car crash, there was an airplane crash, there was a sunken boat, and a lot of people died. And it appears to be, it is a great tragedy. But in another sense, it's their karma. They had it coming to them, we might say, in a very sort of spiritual, unattached way. The people had it coming to them. So it's difficult to accept the idea of karma, but it is acceptable that sometimes tragical things happen, and sometimes good things happen. But it's just a very mysterious phenomenon that occurs regularly. So why do good things happen to bad people, and why do bad things happen to good people? It happens because of an inoperative, an unseen law, or we could call it the law of karma. It's an unseen phenomenon that exists, that due to our past, or due to our present, or due to our actions, things that are unforeseen sometimes happen. And if we're able to accept those things for good or for better or for worse, it shows that we're spiritually advanced, that we can accept bad things, that we can accept disease, old age, difficulties that come regularly. Not regularly, but they do come. And those who can accept those things as part of karma, they're more spiritually in the know. So they have a sense of what karma is. So in this verse, a wife is being offered these are very highly advanced people, Swayambhuva Manu and others that are mentioned here. To go into another phase of life is not an easy thing to do, but it can be done by spiritually advanced people. So, does anyone have any questions or anything to say? Go ahead, Ram.
I really like that last comment you made. The people involved are very advanced.
Wait. Thank you.
I like your last comment that the people involved here in this situation are very advanced spiritually. Like to think that Devahuti, isn't it? Yep. To go from being, a princess to just living in a bark hut or something, it seems impossible to change that like that in your life. But so I was thinking, we're not on that platform yet, so sometimes it's hard to understand.
Very difficult to understand. And there's an incident that's narrated by Prabhupada about Sudama Brahman, who was a very, very poor Brahminical character. He just lived in rags practically, and in a hovel where he lived. And because he associated directly with the Supreme Lord Krishna, when he came back to his house, he saw that it had been converted into a palace, and his wife had been converted into a beauty queen, and they had plenty of wealth and plenty of everything. So, and this person, I don't know how old he was, but he had lived a life of a poverty-stricken individual, and all of a sudden things changed. So that happens, and sometimes just the reverse thing happens. A person who is very wealthy and very successful in life loses everything, loses all of his money, loses all of his property. It's a very difficult thing to perceive. But in the days of yore, when people were very advanced, they could make arrangements that were suitable, and reputations were built upon honesty, not upon wealth or fame or some material facility that some people have. But everything could be taken away. So that's in days of yore, people were considered to be fortunate. Or sometimes Prabhupada uses this word fortunate. Sometimes he uses the word unfortunate. But he did tell us that fortunate and unfortunate is worse in a sense. than being unlucky or just having bad karma, what we might say. So one could be, and that is inexplicable. What is fortune and what is misfortune? And it's like karma. It's difficult to perceive, to understand, but it does exist. So we're not living in the past. Anything else? Yes?
Thank you for class, Maharaj. In the process of transmigration of the soul, how much memory is held by the spirit soul? Will we remember all previous lives and even at the time of liberation?
Generally not. We can't remember even in our this present life, what we were doing when we were 2 or 3 months old. What to speak of a past life. Of course, there are some hypnotists and some specialists who are able to regress people into a past life, but that's very, very rare. And as far as remembering what I was in my past life, almost impossible. When Prabhupada was once asked, I know, what you were in your past life, he was very dismissive about what he was in his past. He said, well, one astrologer said that I had something to do with medical science, that maybe I was a doctor or something like that. But he himself didn't exhibit any recollection of what he was in his past life. So it can be ascertained, and there have been some films probably made and even books written about people who had some recollection of a past life, and it was even able to be proved that where they were and what they did, but they only could remember little pieces, little glimpses of maybe what they were, and how old they were, and where they were, and where they were born, and what languages they spoke, and very, very rare. But we try. But an expert astrologer who knows the details of our birth down to the second, and the coordinates of where we were born, can actually tell us those kinds of things that we can't even possibly remember.
And at the time of liberation, would we...
Time of what?
Liberation,
yeah.
Like return back to Godhead, would we even know that we lived millions of lives, or would it be as if it never happened?
At the time of liberation, of course, liberation is a very generic term. It can be liberation into the Brahma Jyoti, it can be liberation into Vaikuntha, it can be liberation into Krishna's presence. But when one is in that state, the memory has increased a lot, and then one has the ability to remember one's past. Although at that time it's of inconsequential what we were. It doesn't really matter. It's what I am now that really matters, and what I'm going to be. A person who's reaches the Krishna's planet, or Krishna has an association with Krishna, is so perfectly happy that what one was in one's past is insignificant.
Would there be awareness of having lived lives though, or would that just be like it never happened?
As far as I know, when one is spiritually advanced, one knows, is sure that such a thing as transmigration of the soul exists. So when someone dies in other parts of the world, like in India, where almost everybody believes in transmigration of the soul, it's not the end of everything. And a demon can become a devotee, and then a devotee can die and go back to Godhead, and a devotee can become a demon. It can happen either way, and that demon can be reborn and take rebirth in an animal body many times. It's possible, but we try to be as spiritually advanced as possible, and not worry about what we were in our past life. Although there a lot of people have sociologists and psychologists have speculated that anyone can find out what they were in their past, but it's not an easy thing to do, even when they're hypnotized, as some people say.
All right, thank you.
You're welcome. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Maharaj, on the topic of reputation, I've heard that it's said that the only possession that a sannyasi has is his reputation. Could you kindly comment on this?
Well, you're a sannyasi, so you probably know the answer. You probably know it better than I do. But I would think that one's reputation is what matters the most, and it can be either good or bad depending on what you do. It can be good and then it can become bad. It can be bad and then it can become good. So reputation is a very flickering kind of thing. It can be good. It can be bad. It's like money. Money we can have a lot of, and then it can all be taken away. It wasn't mine. It was just a thing, and it belongs to anybody. It doesn't really belong to anyone except Krishna, of course. Everything belongs to him. But the reputation is a very temperamental and uncertain thing. And you could say that a renunciant or a sannyasi has nothing to possess at all except his reputation. And we try to have a good reputation as much as possible. When I say we, I mean you and I, and all of us. I think we want to have a good reputation, but we don't always have one.
I'm going to question.
Go ahead. You want to pass the microphone?
I've got a question. Thank you, Maharaj. I was just going to ask you about with the astrological calculations and the accuracy of the astrological calculation. Say if you have like the hours and the minutes, but you don't have like the exact seconds or something, will that still give you some broader look into your life and the way you are and
well,
things?
from what I know, which is not very much, the more you get it right down to the very second, the more accurate the predictions are, and the looks into your past are. But I think if you only know the hour and the city, it's just anybody's guess.
Yeah.
What's going to happen?
But you still get some kind of scope. Like some,
I would say that for the general rule is that we should avoid astrology. The devotees or people in general should avoid it because 99% of it is just charlatanism. It's people say that you're an Aries or a Pisces or whatever, but that's not enough.
Yeah. Thank you.
Hare Krishna. Maharaj, we often hear the term innocent bystander when someone gets caught up in some tragedy. Can we say for sure then there's no such thing as an innocent bystander?
Can we say
there's no such thing as an innocent bystander?
In a sense, there's no such thing as innocent anything. There was an article written by a good writer in ISKCON called Myth of the Innocent Citizen. Myth of the Innocent Citizen. In other words, everything has a reason. Everything is happening by karma. There's no such thing as innocence. All those people whose houses were burnt down were not necessarily innocent. They had some things to answer to. So when we say innocent, we have to be careful about the words that we use. That doesn't mean that a person is devoid of karmic reaction. That's kind of what we think innocence means. But in a sense, the innocence doesn't really exist. Because nobody, in a sense, is innocent. We all have some things to answer for, either in this life or our past life. And therefore, it's very difficult to find anything or anyone that's innocent. Prabhupada has said once that children are they appear to be innocent because they don't have fixed opinions about a lot of things. But as they grow up and mature, they start becoming more and more opinionated, and that's where the difficulties ensue, and that's where innocence begins to fly out the window. Yes?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. If someone going through result of bad karma, who is not devotee, who doesn't have spiritual knowledge, I was advised that not to explain to them this law of karma because it might disturb them. But at the same time, I feel that this knowledge will help them to overcome their difficulty. So how can we help them in a way not to disturb them, or at the same time give them spiritual knowledge to know?
Karma is such a difficult thing to understand that I very rarely would try to explain it to a newcomer, because it's a very complex phenomenon. To say we have good karma or bad karma in a past life or in this life, it's kind of meaningless to most people. What is karma? And it's a concept that is very rarely understood. Krishna, of course, knows everything about karma, but I was saying, we don't know what we were doing in our past. We don't know what we were doing like years ago. We can't remember anything. So karma is a very mysterious and difficult thing to know. So the point is that I wouldn't try to explain it to anyone, I mean, who is new, what karma is, because it has to do with a spiritual life, and reincarnation is part of it. It's just it's a difficult thing. So it's if a person is serious about Krishna consciousness, then maybe they can begin to understand a little bit about what we're talking about when we say karma. But otherwise, it's a very almost inexplicable phenomenon. I wouldn't try. That's my opinion anyway. Hare Krishna. Yes.
Hare Krishna. I just have a comment. I had a miscarriage here on Govardhana Puja Day once, and all the devotees were saying, oh, that soul just had to come for a little bit, and then they had to go back to Godhead. And my Guru Maharaj said, no, karma is so complicated, we don't know.
Thank you. Yeah, when people die at a very young age or just after they're born, we can say, well, he must have had some bad karma. But like you said, there's a lot more to it than that. Yes?
When the British were in India, one of their big complaints about karma was that they say you've done something wrong in a past life, but their complaint was that, well, it doesn't seem fair that you're going to suffer in this life because you've got no remembrance of what you did. But in some respects, I was thinking it's not entirely, like their complaint's not so valid, because we got all these samskaras that we've inherited, from past lives, attitudes, and, the way we see the world because of karma.
Well, I mean, this is not exactly what you're talking about, but I think the British Empire had a lot to answer for, because they committed a lot of atrocities when they were the rulers or colonists of England. They killed people, they made them eat meat, and so they may be born as demons or insects in a future life. They have a lot to answer for. So even though they were famous as empire builders and courageous and all that sort of thing, it's all very temporary according to karma. Yeah, they obviously, to exploit an entire nation of millions of people is not good, and so one has to pay with whatever, with one's life or whatever it is. So the general complaint about that part of the world is that it's poverty-stricken, and there's no concept of why it's poverty-stricken and why there's anything wrong with it. But that part of the world, people criticize the caste system, thinking that in a way that's a difficult thing to process. How there can be very wealthy people, very poor people, very unsuccessful people, and people who have no hope of getting anything in this life like wealth and so on. So that was one of the big complaints. But the good thing about India was that the British had a warm place to go to holiday, and so it had its good aspects. But around about 1947, They just decided they were out of here. And the history of it is that when Subhash Chandra Bose started to form the Indian National Army, the British thought, oh, we're not going to fight with these people. And Subhash got a lot of Gurkhas who were expert fighters that were captured by the British, by the Germans. And he got them to come back to India and to make up the Indian National Army. So that's a bit of history that, anyway, you probably are aware of this. Okay, last question or comment?
There's a comment, maybe you'd like to comment further. I'm remembering Prabhupada Lilamrita, and Srila Prabhupada remembers that there was a challenge from one of his teachers at Scottish Churches College about this karma question. And the teacher's challenge is if there's a judgment against someone, there must be a witness. So where is the witness?
Yeah, I remember that, reading about that. So that was one of the famous Scottish and British complaints, that if there's karma, where's the witness? And if there's no witness, there's no karma. They said that. And that you know, it's just a thing that exists. Thank you very much for that comment.
Who is the witness?
Huh?
Who is the witness?
Yeah, they asked him, who is the witness? But there's many things that are not witness. There was a story that Prabhupada once told, I think I mentioned this in class, that two people, an Indian man, two British people got in an argument. And it was a very heated argument. And finally one of them actually murdered the other one. And nobody knew what this argument was about, except that there was one man who overheard them talking, and he was an Indian man, and he was a farmer, a very simple Brahmin, but he was, in a sense, a carryover from days of yore, from the times of the past, from the good old days. And he had such a good memory that even though he didn't know a word of English, he knew what they were arguing about, and he was the witness. He took the witness stand, and based on his testimony, the one man was executed, the murderer. Anyway, that's not exactly what you were talking about, but he was the witness.
I believe Prabhu is asking, in the case of karma, what would be our reply to the British?
Well, we don't have a reply to British atrocities or to anything good or bad that happens to people, whether they're good or bad. But Krishna is the ultimate witness. He knows everything that happened, and he knows everything about a person's past. I think Prabhupada once said that Yamaraj, who knows he's able to read minds, and he knows everything we did in our past. When we were maybe 3 years old, we killed an insect or we stepped on an ant or something. And so he said in a joking way that God has his accountant. Everything that we did, everything that we thought of, and everything that every sinful activity is recorded by Yamaraj. And so at the time of death, when the Yamadutas come to get us, that's the reason. They know that we deserve it. And we're taken to Yamaraj. And there was one devotee who smeared himself with defecation in hopes that Yamaraj's Yamadutas wouldn't go anywhere near him. But he was spoiled. Okay, I think we'll stop at that point. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna.
Jai Srila Prabhupada ki jai.